and even want to change. But we've known for a while that those are kind of a bit broken. You know, the fast shutdown path, don't need to go into the details, but there are problems with use counters that really need to be fixed. And this has not really had any ownership, this area. HTTP archive is the publicly available corpus, about 500,000 pages. And there's now a way to query those using BigQuery. We don't have a link here yet. We're going to put up a link to something that Rick wrote and how to do that. Something I'm quite excited about is if we could, because the HTTP archive crawls, they're already done using Chrome. So they're collecting histograms. If we could just extract out the use counters from that, then we could find out which APIs which code paths are triggered, at least on the first load of lots of pages. And that would be awesome, because sometimes we have these things we want to change, but we don't know who's using it. Maybe this could answer some of those questions. If there's a bad thing that you don't want to use, say sync HHR, then you have to try really quite hard to manage to do that. It's like rolling a boulder uphill, avoiding some death traps, and then, okay, so you're at the top of the hill with a boulder, but you can't really make it stay there because, well, there's no way to do it. I mean, for C++, if we fix all our compiler warnings, we turn on W error. And so maybe feature policy could be this thing for the web, where if you say, I promise I don't want to use sync HHR, and if I try to anyway because I accidentally included this framework thing, then just make it not work, so you don't regress in that regard. Similar but not exactly the same is this idea of collecting deprecation warnings in the wild. So we're not sure what impact deprecation warnings really have, but we can be pretty sure that lots of them aren't seen. And their web developers maybe would like to see them, but don't really have a way to notice when they're happening, unless they're just testing the whole site with the console open all day long. So what if we had an API that could report things that are going to break in the wild, something like CSP report mode? Details TBD. And also, we need to figure out what to do with some of the deprecation messages, because we have two buckets of things. We have things that are actionable that we want to remove that web developers should take seriously. They're not used much, but there's a problem that they need to fix. And then we have these few things that are more hopeful, that are bad, that we want to get rid of, but are not on the same fast path to removal. And we need to somehow separate those, so we're not tricking developers into spending time on the things that aren't going to affect them in the near term. A few small things. We want it to be easy for teams to see the regression rates, like per milestone, and how long it takes to fix those regressions. I mean, and here we mean regressions in the web compat sense. Also, there's some work ongoing to write sample code for common UI patterns, things like infinite scrolling or parallax, that kind of thing. And that, it turned out, was useful in figuring out what's actually hard about it and actually finding some bugs as well, interop issues, I mean. The full screen API is a particular mess. We're going to fix that. Chromestatus.com is not as useful as it could be and not very well staffed. So there's some low-hanging fruit there to make that more useful both to Blink developers and to web developers. Right now, yeah, you can't see what's been removed, and it's easy to get the wrong idea from the data. Perhaps most importantly, and finally, how do we know we're making progress at all? Or how do we know what to prioritize? We don't really have a tight feedback loop here. So we're thinking maybe as a one-off we should do a survey for web developers to ask them what they are suffering from. Like what are the APIs? So details TBD again, but what are the APIs that they struggle the most with, that are the worst? Or what browser engines give you the most trouble? So we can just figure out where the biggest holes are and if we can do anything about it.
All right. So, what's next? What can you do? So first and foremost, as Philip said, this is a cross-cutting issue, and we need every web platform team to be thinking about predictability, just like you're thinking about performance and security of your features. I think most teams are already doing this a lot, but there's a few specific tips. If you check out our project sites page, we've got a few specific tips that we found useful in some of the teams we've been involved in. Certainly the input team that I used to lead. Recently, we did a query where we just looked at what's the most starred bugs in our area. And some of it wasn't at all surprising. It was like, oh, hey, these are the things we've heard from developers. Hey, they want pointer events. They want these other things, right? They're right up at the top of the list, starred hundreds of times. But there was one or two in there. I think smooth scroll was a good one. We finally shipped that. So a lot of these were things that we knew independently, but maybe it took us a little longer than it should have to realize that we should prioritize. But we also found a couple where we were like, oh, yeah, I remember this issue. You know, I didn't realize that developers cared so much. We better prioritize some of these. And also just as we try to ramp up our discipline on regressions, we should be paying more attention to, for example, Pri0, Pri1 bugs that have been opened as regressions in the last 30 days. You know, things that you might have a chance of actually fixing before the browser hits stable, prevent it from impacting most developers. And also, a big thing here, the only way you can really understand predictability is if you invest in understanding how your feature behaves on the web, which means understand how it behaves in other browser engines. Get to know your colleagues at other browser engines, right? I got really passionate about this only after I had like some Microsoft folks noodling me, you know, saying like, this is, why isn't, you know, somebody poked us and said, why isn't Google involved at all in standardization of touch input? I was like, oh yeah, that sounds like a bad thing. I guess we should be talking to you guys about that. And once you get to know who the people are at the other engines that are working on the same things as you, and you realize your interests are all aligned, it can really make it a lot easier to come to some of the same conclusions and improve predictability for developers. Web platform tests aren't yet at the point where we would want to encourage everyone to invest a ton of time in them. We've got to do a bunch of work first, but some teams are already. And if you're interested, you absolutely should go take a look and see what tests are there already for your features. Try running them. See what fails. Maybe there's some bugs there that are actually worth, or maybe you want to improve the test coverage. Some of the tests aren't the best quality, to be honest, but some of them are pretty good. Right, so those are all ways you can improve predictability for your features. And then we want to hear from you. We basically see ourselves as a infrastructure or like service team, similar to like Speed Infra. We've got the mailing list, platformpredictability@chromium.org is on the title slide. Send us an email. Tell us what we can do to help you make your features more predictable. And like, where's the common stuff that no one's been investing in before because it really spans teams. Those are the things we should invest in. And also let us know what great ideas you have. We're going to do a brainstorm session tomorrow. If you've got ideas, please come chat with us. And if you're particularly passionate about any of these, right now Philip and I are working on this full time. I'm probably going to hire some more people. But we've got a lot of people that are passionate about this space and investing 20% time. So if there's things here that you're passionate about, please sign up. There's a spreadsheet here that's our backlog. We've got lots of ideas. Put your name next to something. Talk with us. We'd love to have help. That's it. Questions? Comments?
So let's do it then.
Yeah. Okay. I guess. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes. Question.
Mike.
So you talked about a tool where a developer could submit a bug and it could automatically bisect and send reports to developers. That sounds like the best thing ever. Are we doing that?
Well, it's not on our Q3 list. It's definitely on my aspirational list. I think it's on our backlog. We are taking steps in that direction. Absolutely. So, for example, the perf team. Perf has been doing bisecting for a long time, right? Pretty much the only way, if you've ever been a perf sheriff, the only way to make progress as a perf sheriff is by bisecting and finding out who to blame. Because no one is going to invest their time to understand this regression, because it's hard until they know that there's a finger pointing squarely at them. So you need to bisect not just down to a build, but to a particular CL. And so the perf team has bots for doing this, but they're kind of flaky and hard, and they finally decided enough is enough. It's just infrastructure. Let's just build Chrome at every freaking CL and archive those builds. And then we can bisect very quickly without all the unreliability and waiting involved in creating builds. So perf team is doing that regardless, and we're hopeful that our QA team will start using that as well, so that when you get these etouch.net bugs, They, instead of going to some random person on the list of the changelog, they go to the person that landed the CL. And then we'd like to leverage that as well. At the very least, we're talking with Anantha and the QA team about how we can better have web platform bugs that developers file go through their normal QA process so that bugs can get routed quickly to the person that regressed it. And we've got other ideas of how we can expand this. I'd love for developers, when their site breaks, I'd love for developers to be able to run a bisect themselves. But there's some challenges there. We can't actually release the Chrome builds to the public, so they'd have to be Chromium, so that would be a separate. Anyway, so we're just taking some stuff in that direction. No one's seriously talked about a unified bug database. I mean, there is this.
There's webcompat.org.
There's webcompat.org, but that's a little different. That's more about this site is broken on one browser and not the other. It's similar.
Yeah, what they usually do is they try to reach out to the page and tell them, oh, it's broken, and I guess they work around it somehow.
Yeah.
Another patch on the sandwich.
Yeah, but I think there's definitely appetite. Talking with Microsoft and Mozilla folks, there's appetite in sharing more data, sharing more resources.
How will you know if you're succeeding?
It's a really good question. How will we know if we're succeeding? Dimitri asked, how will we know if we're succeeding? So to me, the ultimate metric that I care about is are people spending more time on the web relative to other platforms? But I think that's a very long-term goal. In the shorter term, I think the things that matter more immediately is how much does it cost to build a website? Like that effing open web article, right? If you can build a high-quality PWA the more we shift this equation, the more we'll see startups and small companies investing in web instead of native, or choosing to do a great job everywhere instead of a crappy job on the web and a great job on native. So I think we'll learn a little bit anecdotally by how we see the ecosystem shift. Trying to quantify that is hard. This is why I'm particularly excited about developer surveys.
Yeah, if we do that on a recurring basis.
Yeah, I would like
even then that's going to be kind of saved every year. That's still going to be too slow to really adapt. But yeah, I think there's some objective metrics that would be kind of useful.
I mean, I've worked on, I don't want to say more, what's the right? I've worked on more traditional platforms in my past, and developer surveys were actually a huge part of this. Like the number one metric, net satisfaction. How happy are developers with our platform relative to other platforms? So to me, that's a big piece of it. I'm hopeful.
But say you take the API catalog. That's pretty easy to measure if you're making progress or not. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can put a number on it. I don't know. Mm-hmm. So there's some room at least. There's some objective metrics that could tell us something interesting.
Mm-hmm. I'm also really excited about having a site, something like html5test.com, that's just showing all the different engines and how they're doing, what their test pass rates are looking like, for example. I think that.
Yeah, the gamification there is the challenge maybe.
Yeah. In particular, I feel like we should be a little ashamed. I think Mozilla has invested a lot more than we have in spec conformance and predictability, and they should have something they could point to and say, just like a perf benchmark. Look, Chrome, we're kicking your butt on this. What are you going to do about it? I want to feel that pressure. So.
Yeah.
I feel like predictability is a new word in this game, because conformance and interop has been around for a while, but sometimes it feels aimless. Mm-hmm. And it's like we just want to interrupt. And are you thinking about expanding this wider and saying look, predictability is the goal. Interop was just a step.
Yeah, I think so. Dimitri's question is predictability is kind of a new word for this. Are we thinking about it broadly, more broadly than just interop? And absolutely, I think that's true. In particular, I think we want to think about. Dimitri talked about the decision tree that developers want to make, right? I mean, we can spend a lot of time working on interop of an API that's almost never used, and that improves interoperability. But does it help predictability much if developers aren't even hitting that API, if they aren't using it much? To me, what matters most is that developers can reason about the platform and that they're not being surprised all the time. And so it's just reducing these surprises that developers talk about. So to me, that's much broader than just interop.
And there are also APIs which are interoperable. It's just that they're not very nice to have on your platform, like Sync HHR. So
yeah.
Because then your performance becomes unpredictable. So that's not strictly speaking a matter of interop. And it's also not a matter of compat. Well, there's a compat risk in trying to fix it, but I think predictability covers that as well.
Chris? You want to get him the mic?
It might just be easier to have you repeat.
I can repeat it. Yeah.
Have you considered mining data from Stack Overflow?
Have we considered mining data from Stack Overflow? Yes, we're working with Robert Nyman, who's DevRel in Stockholm, coincidentally enough, conveniently enough. And he's already undertaking a project to try to do a better job of mining data from web developers and understand where their pain points are. He's building out a big list of what all the data sources are.
Yeah, it's a long list.
And Stack Overflow is very high up there, but it's a long list of lots of places. So absolutely. It's hard to know. Like, I think it's still in an exploration stage. I don't know how actionable or how we'll be able to prioritize based on that, but certainly we should be looking at it and trying to figure that out. So obviously this is a partnership. Like, understanding how developers are feeling is a partnership with DevRel for sure.
How do you get
Alex.
lots of developers to fill out your survey? Like, they might not feel that it's worth it for them to
Yep.
do. So
How do
you make it show them the value of sharing feedback?
So the question is, how do we get lots of developers to fill out the survey? We're still in early days of trying to plan the survey. I think we've got lots of ideas.
There is some precedent, I think.
Yeah, there's different examples where surveys have been done successfully before. So first is to learn from some of those. I'm like, honestly, I think all ideas on the table. I'm not opposed to paying developers to fill out a survey, for example. But I think oftentimes web developers, at least the ones that you see on Twitter and posting these articles, they care about this, right? They want to be able to succeed in a platform without gatekeepers, right? They want to be able to succeed in a platform where they can write once and reach many, many, many users. And so I hope that with some evangelism and working with our partners at standards organizations and other browser vendors, that over time this could become something that's just part of being a web developer, as periodically, giving, helping the whole community, not just Google, not just the Blink project, but helping the whole community understand how to better address their needs.
Yeah. I mean, as a first step, just have the DevRel departments of every interested browser point to this thing, and that should give us some interesting information at least.
I also don't think we need a huge amount of data to get some value out of it, right? I don't think, on the one hand, I don't think it'll be too surprising what we see, but even having if we had a couple thousand developers fill in something where they just listed their most frustrating APIs, and then we did some keyword analysis on that, we could probably find some interesting things that could help us prioritize.
I think one thing we really don't have, I don't have a hunch about, is how much time is the sum of all the small things, like the paper cuts. How much of pain is that compared to, say, a big new feature is supported in X, Y, and Z, but not Omega, I guess. Mm-hmm. So that could be interesting, yeah.
Anything else? All right, thanks everyone.
What are the differences going to be? So you can be in.
Data center is
It's like a bit that changes the effect of